Now this looks like an interesting thing, how indie games destroyed the AAA industry.
How did Halo go from this to this? And how can a
That's just called evolution. And that is the reason why I refuse to believe in evolution.
game made by one dude in his bedroom have a larger player base than Halo, Call of Duty, and Battlefield combined? To answer these questions, we
Which
first
game
need
is
to
that?
understand why AAA studios have taken all of their desire to make fun games and just thrown it out the window.
Diablo Immortal.
From what I found, it all started a few decades back when the video game industry really became mainstream with the release of Space Invaders. This
Wow.
game took the world
That was an old game.
by storm and really put video games on the map. See, companies
Wow.
were scrambling to get a piece of the growing video game industry, and the man who kicked everything off was Space Invaders' only developer, Tomohiro Nishikado. See, the thing
Ooh.
is, back in the 70s and early 80s, most games were made by one or a few developers. You couldn't
Well, back in the 70s and 80s, you didn't exactly have a lot of things to do. You didn't have a lot of choices. You could be a 11-year-old who's hooked on drugs and alcohol already, or you could have a decent normal life. And a decent normal life at that time sounded kind of like super boring to most people because it was just a different time. So, this was a third option which no one saw coming.
pack much into a whopping 4 kilobyte game cartridge after all. So games were simple in design, but because developers couldn't lean on graphics or music to attract a lot of players, games developed at this time really
cares
had to be fun. And
I
Tomohiro
have never heard of anyone who buys a game because of the music, honestly.
understood this
There are
perfectly.
probably
In
some,
an interview
though.
a few years ago, Tomohiro even had this to say: "Yes, I developed Space Invaders by myself. In those days, that was the standard for games to be made by one person. Today, however, that work in development is so divided and specialized that one person can't really see the whole picture. And in that
Well, that's kind of obvious. Space Invaders is literally a 2D game without color, and it's extremely simple. You can't really compare it to, anything like Dark Souls now. Obviously, it's not a one-man job.
sense, I think developers need to go back to the beginning. Although Tomohiro doesn't fully explain what he means by beginning, what I interpret his words to mean is to get back to where each team member understands the vision of the game they are working to create.
Okay.
The video game industry wouldn't be the same without Tomohiro, and I believe he's a huge reason why gaming is what it is today. Space Invaders captivated
So he's blaming the current situation on one old Japanese dude because he made gaming popular. I'm joking, but that's kind of what it sounds like in this context.
millions around the world, causing people to fall in love with video games and ushering in the golden age of the AAA.
Minecraft
Over the
was
next
a
few years,
mistake.
technology for making games improved drastically, and games became more sophisticated, requiring more people
Okay.
for development. Couldn't just make a game on your own anymore. The industry was maturing, and teams needed all sorts of talent and specialization to make games work. Game studios began expanding at an incredible rate to create more advanced
True.
games. So as the 80s and 90s progressed, we see less and less solo developers like Tomohiro producing these great games. Bungie is a great example of this. They only
I think a game that was developed by one dude also was Hollow Knight or something. I don't remember. There was a really good 2D game that was... No, it wasn't Hollow Knight. It was something similar-ish to that, though. Developed by one dude. I can't remember what it's called. And it's like, at this point, it's like at least a 7-year-old game, and I think. Someone will probably know what I'm talking about in the comments.
had 3 employees in the early 90s, and together the 3 of them went on to create a few successful games: Operation Desert Storm, Minotaur:
Ooh.
Labyrinth of Crete, and Pathways into Darkness. But they were relatively small and simple. A few more employees were added over the years, and the company grew. Most of the employees were college students with nothing but the desire to make fun games, probably inspired by developers like Tomohiro. As Chris Butcher put it,
The culture of Bungie is pretty simple. There's a bunch of college kids who wanted to drink beer and eat pizza and do amazing cool stuff in their basement.
It was a simpler time.
10 years after the launch of Bungie, 40 people were doing just that. And from the scrappy team nourished by pizza and beer, Halo was born. Obviously, it exploded
Nice.
in popularity. It felt like Halo was the only reason most people bought an Xbox. Microsoft, of course,
True.
loved it, so more money, talent, and resources were just thrown at Bungie to make Halo 2. But even though the team grew in size, the culture was still the same. The Bungie team was passionate about making the best game, and man, they did just that. Halo 2 was released and people lost their minds over it. I mean, it was national news. With the successful launch of Halo 2, Bungie was on a pedestal and people couldn't wait to see what would come next. 2007 finally rolled around, and if you thought the hype for Halo 2 was big, Halo 3 was even bigger. The multiplayer,
Bro.
the campaign, and the community were on a whole new level. It was the pinnacle of gaming. So Bungie did it. They had set out to create some of the best games of our era and were ready to throw in the towel after Halo 3. The studio had achieved what it set out to do. They were ready to move on.
Cool.
It was really important to us to end on a high note with Halo 3.
But of course, Microsoft couldn't let that happen.
Ooh.
Halo was the golden goose.
Is this the moment where the big bad corporate greed starts showing its ugly face? Because it looks like it.
And they weren't done with it. So Bungie was asked to create one more Halo game before leaving Microsoft.
One
And
more.
That game was Halo Reach.
Oh,
Halo Reach was a
nice.
beautiful game. The campaign was emotional, and the Forge was unreal. That said, I don't think Halo Reach was as good as Halo 3. Right? Don't get me wrong. I think it's a phenomenal game. I mean, it made 200
The reason Halo Reach wasn't as good as Halo 3, because chances are you were like 15-ish when you played Halo 3. When you played Halo Reach, you had problems, you had a life, you had responsibilities. You know, the big R word that you're not supposed to say in the gaming world because it's evil. You know, that kind of things happened.
$200 million on its launch day. To many, it was peak Halo. However, for me, I believe Halo Reach wasn't made with as much passion as the previous Halos because the team had already told the Halo story they wanted to tell. Players were pretty sad.
That's
when
probably
Bungie
true,
moved on
though.
from Halo, but excited to see what they would do next. And as we watched Bungie give its farewell, Microsoft, behind the scenes, handed the Halo mantle to a new studio, 343. Well, only a year had passed since Reach, and it was announced that Halo 4 would be coming out in 2012. At the time, most of us didn't think about Halo 4 being made by another developer as being too big of a deal. We were just excited for more Halo. And on launch day, the hype clearly had a big impact on Halo 4 because it made $220 million. Players
Well, yeah, because everything was going fine. No one expected anything bad to happen at this rate. It's a money printing machine. You can't honestly even blame Microsoft for telling you, come on, you got one more in you. You know, it's like that autistic kid in school when he's mad and he wants to beat someone up, and everyone's like, come on, you got this, bro, you got this. Evil, but accurate.
were eager to continue the story of Master Chief, but something was different. The gameplay was different. It just felt off. I mean, it looked like Halo, but it didn't feel like Halo. And only after a few months in, players started dropping like flies, flocking back to Halo 3 and Reach. At the time, players thought that maybe it was just a fluke. 343 was learning the ropes and got caught up in that Call of Duty hype. Halo 5...
You can't expect a new studio in this case, to just actually be faithful to what they have previously made. They may lose the spark. And let's be real, even games that are one-hit wonders sometimes do not make anything after that great, because it was a fluke. Even the first time was a fluke, and the second time the same people are thinking, oh, we're now going to make version 2 of this, and it's going to be better, it's going to be great. It turns out bad because it was just luck that the first one was that good. So passing off to a new studio, the Halo thing, bad decisions.
5 will be different. 343 learned their lesson. Halo 5 rolls around and it makes $400 million in its first 24 hours. So people loved it, right? Nope. No co-op campaign, overly aggressive and competitive multiplayer, and no content at launch. How can a company screw up so many things that their predecessors, Bungie, had already paved the path for? Players at this point just hoped 343.
Well, again, it's so simple to screw it up because you didn't know what made it great. You were just someone who took over the reins and you had no idea what you were doing. You kind of saw a thing that said, well, checkpoint 1, Master Chief. Checkpoint 2, kind of something Spartan armor. Checkpoint 3, this type of vehicles and this type of guns. You know, you kind of have the formula, but what makes it special is the smaller details. And that's what they can't replicate.
Was going to learn from their mistake. They would listen to the community this time and release a game that players really want.
Yeah, sounds
Ross
about
said
right.
343 will do better, and promise
Yeah.
there will be a co-op campaign this time. The next Halo will be different.
And I would say
And Diablo Immortal wasn't a cash grab.
for any FPS going out forward, we will always have split screen in going forward.
Well, that wasn't included in launch, and they said it was coming, and now inexplicably it has been canceled.
Wow.
Split screen co-op has been canceled in Halo
Wow.
Infinite.
We have had to make the difficult decision not to ship campaign split screen co-op and take
Wow.
the resources that we would use on that and go after this list and all these other things that we're going to talk about in just a second.
How can a company with 6 years of development, $500 million, make a game with such little content, so many bugs, a garbage progression system?
It is
and just be okay to
astonishing,
release?
though,
How
really.
can 343 screw up this much? It just doesn't make sense. We've heard many answers from the community. 343 didn't earn it. 343 doesn't like Halo. 343 is trying to turn
Probably
a party
true.
game into a competitive game. All valid answers. But you would think
Probably also very true, by the way. There was this time when competitive... I don't even remember what it started off with, but there was a time where every game that got released was already intended to be a big competitive thing, because that was just a new thing. And I don't remember when this happened, but it was like 2 years we lived like that. And every game that released at that time period was just bad, because they didn't try to make a good game, most companies at least. They tried to make it an instantaneous competitive experience off the start. So they had more input in the competitive menus than anywhere else in the game. It was awful.
that if 343 really cared, they would figure out how to make a good Halo game. However, the main reason why 343 just can't make a good Halo game is because something about the company is fundamentally broken. Let's compare 343 to Bungie. So Bungie's entire company culture revolved around making the best game possible. This drove them to make Halo bigger and better each release. 343's focus, on the other hand, revolves around money and how they can make more.
True.
Every Halo game they release has less content and has gotten worse.
Even indie games don't have problems with creating a progression system, yet multiverses and Splitgate just fucking blow Halo Infinite out of the water. You don't even have a progression system.
It's easy to see
I mean, that's actually kind of a stupid point, because the reason free-to-play games can do these things is, and he shows, like Fortnite. Fortnite is making $1 billion off of 10-year-olds currently, okay, per second, roughly, you know, around that mark. You know, maybe a little bit more than $1 billion per second. $1 billion per microsecond, okay? Let's be real here. They have the money to invest in that stuff. And, you know, that's one of the rare companies that actually does it. What Actman is saying is complete stupid cope. Absolutely 100% just something on cope here. Most free-to-play games do not do that, okay? Most free-to-play games fail or completely try to milk their audience after a month because they understand that they're starting to fail. That is such a cope thing. And saying again, well, Fortnite's doing it. Yeah, they're literally the #1 game in the world for, or competing with Minecraft for the #1 and 2 spot for how many years in a row now? Yeah, they're gonna have the money because they're swimming in money.
System.
It's easy to see the difference in quality between these two studios, but it's not as easy to see why there's a difference. And this is why 343 doesn't have the capacity to make a good game. The leaders of the company don't put quality of the game first. They put
Who cares? This guy's getting paid at the end of the day. What does he care as long as he just fellatios, you know, fellatioing? As long as he fellatios the executives at Microsoft and makes them believe that he is their best dude. Hey, what does this guy care? He's literally buying a yacht every single month. He doesn't care. He has 5 Lambos, and he's about to buy 5 more just because he misclicked.
Money first. And this culture of money first thinking trickles down to everyone. Even if you are a 343 developer that just loves Halo. Any reward as an employee only comes when your work is furthering the goal of making more money, not the best game.
That's not true, by the way.
This is the first time.
Oh, so you're really hoping it doesn't crash, right?
Fantastic.
Fantastic.
Now, I haven't answered a very important question. Why wouldn't 343 prioritize making the best game? Won't that make you more money as a company? At first glance, this seems obvious. Make a good game, you'll make money, right? Well, kind of. If you make a great game and you have a marketing budget, then sure, you're bound to sell copies. But large AAA companies discovered a way to make more money than ever before without necessarily making a great
microtransactions,
game. Live service games.
Yep.
You may have noticed that an
increasing
increasing number of AAA games launched live service games with battle passes and content roadmaps. Why?
What am I supposed to do without the battle pass? Think for myself? Reward myself with playing the game? Disgusting. That absolutely unacceptable.
Make a lot more money after launch day thanks to microtransactions. You no longer just make money when people purchase your game. It's not one and done. You can make money now during its entire lifespan. The developer is inclined to continue supporting the game and its community long after launch. But it doesn't help that 99 out of 100 live service games coming out these days are only that way because executives are rushing out unfinished products, and most of these games just end up in the AAA graveyard next to Anthem. Still, there are...
Dude, the fact that so many games are complete just garbage on release and can't be even saved by a day one patch is insane. Anthem. He said Anthem. The developers of that game literally admitted that they tweedled their thumbs in their ass for what? 3 out of 4 years of development? And when I say 3 out of 4 years, I mean actually 3 years and 9 months or something like that. They pretty much made the story in game in the last couple of months until release. That was that game, and I'm not joking. This is insanity. AAA industry is just big money and a lot of incompetent people at this point.
There are a few games that have found long-term success with this model. League of Legends, World of Warcraft, Destiny 2. But I would argue that the success of these live service games have hindered the creation of sequels long overdue.
If you ask a Destiny 2 player, is their game currently in good state, they will probably introduce their head to the business end of a force multiplier.
It's been 20 years since Warcraft 3 came out. 20 years. Where in the world is Warcraft 4? The reason Blizzard hasn't made it yet, despite Warcraft 3 being so successful, is because they haven't figured out how to make it a live service. So here we sit in 2022, having
that's not a bad guess, honestly.
Just be bastardized by the companies we once revered. What do we do now? For every bad AAA game released, 10 great indie games are released simultaneously. I mean, why is the Untitled Goose Game the best stealth game I've ever played?
My boo! Hey! I'll just take this.
Why is Hollow Knight, with its dreary atmosphere and tight gameplay, the best Metroidvania? And why is a roguelite indie game about escaping hell
this one's
over
good.
and over
So
simple
good, though.
Play just so perfectly. It's not because these indie developers are the most talented or have oodles of cash on hand. It's because they did one thing and one thing only. They followed the fun. That game about escaping hell over and over is the breakout phenomenon Hades. And I can't think of a game or a game studio
that's a good
more
one.
focused than them on following the fun. Why? Because Supergiant Games spent 2 years with Hades in early access.
I will have to say, this is a little bit a lot copy, okay? Hades is really good, really fun, and really successful because it's really good and really fun. But they're not the only studio that followed the fun, that had soul in it, that had heart in it. It's not the only indie developer by a landslide. A lot of indie developers have that sob story, okay? But most of them fail. Most indie games fail. The difference between AAA games and indie games in reality is just simply this. There's like 10 AAA game releases that you know about. And when they're bad, you really do know about, because everyone in the gaming industry sphere knows about this. But there are literal billions. Well, billions is probably a little bit too high. But there's probably 1 million indie titles coming out, every couple of years in total. Well, that's again too much, but you get the point. For every one AAA game that gets released, there's literally probably tens of thousands indie games that get released. And you know what? Most of those indie games are absolute trash. Forgettable, bland, boring, and just, well, bad. Plain bad, in fact. And a lot of them had soul put into it when they developed it. But you don't hear about them because it's an indie game and no one cares about them. If you compare the success rate of AAA games of producing a product that's okay versus indie games that produce a product that's okay, well, indie games lose out. Because AAA games are far more successful at that than indie games in reality. It's just mass. Because of the mass, you're going to have a couple of games that absolutely just blow everyone's expectations out of the water and are great. Like Hades.
Making sure every detail of the game was what the community wanted. 2 years. I know you hear early access and like live service, you imagine all the train wrecks over the years. But Hades and Supergiant did it right. Hades creative director Greg Kasavin said this about its 2-year early access. With Hades, we identified that we wanted to make an early access game first and foremost to see what we could build in partnership with our community. So the plan was to do early access from the get-go. Supergiant wanted Hades to be in the hands of the community, not for the quick buck like these other games, but because Supergiant wanted to build a fun game that the community would love. This culture, this mentality of following the fun is what sets apart Supergiant Games and a variety of other indie studios from AAA. Us gamers really only want one thing: to play a fun game, alone or with our buddies. And indie studios really understand this concept because they're gamers too. Indie studios these days are
Ooh, that was a good game right there.
Or the original Bungie team. Solo or small team developers who are focused on building something they or the community actually want to play. We seem to have come full circle. Yes, new tools have made it easier than ever to make games, and yes, Steam has made publishing games incredibly simple. But that's not the main reason we are entering the golden age of indie games. If it was, the 100th Minecraft copycat would be rolling in money right now. The reason why indie studios are dominating the video game industry is because indie studios have what AAA studios don't have:
soul,
culture, and a desire to follow the fun.
Yeah, it makes sense.
That's who Bungie is.
A pretty good video, not gonna lie, really good. Go give him a like and whatnot, and like this video, and have a nice day. Bye bye.